You know, if you speak at a commencement, they give you like an honorary degree or something. So I want like a certificate that makes me an honorary procurement officer. Like a little star would be nice, and I can go door to door. That's, you know, that's what you guys do, right? Let's see. And it's called NATCO, right? NATCO. Not NATO, because I had an entirely different speech for NATO. And a convention for my profession often is called NAMM, N-A-M-M, which stands for, I have no idea, and nobody who goes to it does it. You know, I'll ask, and people think they know, they'll say it's the Notable Association of Music Merchants, Music Marines. Nobody knows. So, on the spot, I'm going to put you on the spot. What does NATCO stand for?
I hope I know. North American Transplant Coordinators Organization.
Exactly right. North American Transplant Coordinators Organization, which is actually open much more, is more than just coordinators now. It's very important. But I kept working out the National Association of Transplant Coordinators. I drew out letters, right? And now, meanwhile, when we're here in D.C., we should get some political stuff right out of the way. I think you guys were paying attention that yesterday, Republican candidate Romney announced Paul Ryan to be his vice presidential candidate. You all saw that, right? And you know, he was going to announce it this morning, but he didn't want to be part of our news cycle because, let's face it, this is where the story is. Right? Much more important. Let's see. By the way, and this I want to know, I've gotten to meet Obama a couple of times. I met Michelle. I call them Barry and Shelley. And so if somehow, if let's say Romney gets elected, I will meet his wife, and I need your help. I don't know, is a female Mormon, is that a Mormaid? Because I don't want to say the wrong thing. Also, and by the way, speaking of vice presidents, you know, Paul Ryan, we probably can't avoid discussing the highest profile heart transplant case in recent memory. Former vice president and frequent Darth Vader impersonator, he's very good at it, with Dick Cheney. And originally, Andrew Mullins, who I want to thank for bringing me here, by the way. I really enjoyed doing this. I want to give a shout out to Andrew Mullins. They had almost worked it out with Cheney to sing for you here today instead of me, but he was unavailable. And it has nothing to do with those rumors that you've all heard that he procured his organ by shooting a hunting buddy in the face. That happened, that was years ago, and that guy was a donor, but he was a campaign donor. So you see how misunderstanding should be. But enough about really important things like politics or musical television. I'm actually here to express gratitude. That's my reason for being here. This is how I'm going to start. I'm going to give you guys a joke you can tell at a party or a little. It's really an icebreaker. It's not so much a joke. Let's try it right now. By a show of hands, who here is going to die? Like Evan. Okay, cool. Right. All right. So now, more hands shot up faster here than most times you'll use that. Right? And it still wasn't unanimous right then. Right? You know, here's the thing. This is how I like to put it. We like to say that we save lives, but here's what we do. We extend lives. Nobody's life is saved forever, you know. What we try and do is we try and postpone the inevitable, and transplantation is an amazingly good way to radically reschedule, right? But looking at you, there's probably an app on my iPhone that can calculate this, but I gotta say, let's try and put a number on this. You, along with donors and donor families, are probably personally responsible for 20,000 years of life, right? Maybe it's much more. That's an astonishing thing to me. It's 20,000 years of graceful postponement. And I'm here to express gratitude. 14 years ago, I had a heart transplant. So 14 years of those 20,000 are my years. unable to lift my head off a pillow, not responding well to an LVAD. The nurses at night would wheel in a defibrillator because I guess late at night your blood pressure is more likely to go down, a stroke or a heart attack is a much greater risk. And so I'd be falling asleep, seeing that defibrillator, and I think about that, and I think, if they have to use that, I'm off the list, and most likely I won't wake up, And it helped me separate the idea of pain, which I still don't like pain, I hate pain, and death, they're not the same. Falling asleep every night that defibrillator was wheeled in, that they wheeled in the crash cart, might have been how I said farewell to consciousness and to life. And I thought, well, that's not so bad. And whatever I've learned from life, I've learned it right now. Whatever there is to learn, I've learned it right now. And I thought, well, one of the things I've learned is that death is not the thing to be afraid of. Certainly is worth postponing. And before that and since then, I really haven't encountered, a spiritual tradition where people are, thinking, boy, this is so boring. I wish this mausoleum had cable. We're alive now while we're alive, and what we face after, that's going to be a wonderful journey. But nothing helped me learn that like that LVAD, and I'm grateful to that, and I always hold on to that so that I don't regain a natural fear of death, and that I try and share it with other people. And it's helped me with what I like to call the game. The other big thing that I learned using myself as a guinea pig, but I also learned it from patients that Cedars-Sinai would have me talk to. And what I learned is, especially more depressed patients often get this feeling that there's three participants to their illness. The first is the me, my thoughts, my personality, my ideas, everything I cherish is my identity. And the second participant is this illness. That's the bad thing. That's pretty clear. The third one is the one that's up for grabs. It's the human body. And when you find patients that are, they're waiting for their transplant or they have other grave illnesses, they often feel their body has turned on them and made an alliance with this illness. And how can I fight that? It's two against one and all I am is thoughts. But they're wrong. The body is always on your side. There's a wonderful Reader's Digest story. Okay? Bear with me. See, a guy gets to heaven, and St. Peter says, hey, come on in. But, before you come in, why don't you look over this huge horizon? That's your entire life, right? If you notice, those are your footprints there. And he says, oh, well, there's two sets of footprints. He says, yes, well, that was Jesus was walking beside you. And the guy says, hey, that's great. Hey, wait a second. I remember that valley right there. That was the lowest point in my life. That's when I needed Jesus the most, and yet there's only one set of footprints there. And St. Peter says, yeah, people make that mistake all that time. Jesus was carrying you then. And I've always liked this story. A lot of you have already heard it, especially the way it relates to people going through what your transplant patients are going through. They often feel, especially in this country, especially in the North Atlantic, the North American part of the Transplant Coordinators Organization, especially for some reason culturally here, we often believe our body is working with the enemy. But it's not, and your body is going to fight for you, and your doctors are going to fight for you, and your team is going to fight for you. Why not join the game? Why not fight along with it and make it 2 against 1, and bet that you're going to win? Because what do you have to lose by betting on yourself? If you bet against yourself, big deal, I won. And I think that exactly right. And I think that the positive attitude can help. There's been a lot of studies on that. This room is the people who would know all of that the most. And I just find if somebody gets involved and thinks, how can I help my doctors? How can I help my body? They can do more to help that graceful postponement. That's how I feel. So that's a lot of what I've learned from my own heart failure. But the main reason I'm here is to express gratitude. And of course, not just from me. I want to make you mindful of that 20,000 years of gratitude. that belongs in this room right now. Tens of thousands of organ sales. This year I'm Donate Life Hollywood's Person of the Year, partly because of that public service spot that I mentioned. And I perform at events on behalf of Donate Life Hollywood. For example, in June I sang for and then performed with Jack Black for an event that's informally known as the Renal Prom. It's teens going through dialysis, many waiting for transplants. They get to feel normal and dance with each other, and nobody says, hey, what's that funny thing sticking out of your chest? You know, it's very supportive. And the sort of surprising one was also it's staffed by and largely organized by high school kids who their only connection to renal disease is they want to help. And it's extremely moving to take part in things like that. I met Andrew Mullins at the Virginia Transplant Games, and it was his idea. We had a big choir that sang with us, you know, it was kind of Glee related. They all like to be in the Glee club. Came from, I think, a couple of different high schools, maybe 3. And I got to speak to them about becoming donors. I started with, who here's a donor? Okay, well, who here doesn't have a license yet? You're off the hook right now. And you guys all have ways that you talk to people. Here's what came to me, that 3 forms of grace that come from being a donor. The first is very obvious. It's generous to complete strangers. That somewhere out there, if a tragedy happens in your family, well, there's up to 6, 8 tragedies ready to happen in another family that can be averted. That one's pretty straightforward. The second one, a little more subtle. It's generous to yourself, especially to a young person who becomes a donor. I think it says a lot. It's something that can't be taken away from them. They know they've made a decision like that. And I think it's great for self-esteem. And working as I do with an audience of kids who are the age that are the primary audiences of Glee. Our son David also watches Glee, but that's okay, he's got a family, but he's got an excuse for watching. Self-esteem is a huge issue, you know. And then the third way, and this is how Donate Life has really helped me, it's actually an act of generosity to the donor's own family. When a person dies under tragic circumstances, often a young person, it becomes the biggest event on the horizon of their life. This horrible thing happened. It's like if you take a picture of a friend at the Grand Canyon, the friend is, the foremost thing behind it is some foggy stuff out back. If you walk away 30 feet, it becomes your friend at the Grand Canyon. And then if you walk away 90 feet, it's the Grand Canyon and your friend happens to be there. It's the same way when death is never less, but when it's recent, it's the only thing you can think of. And when some time has passed, it's still the eclipsing event. But eventually you want to get back to where the life is what mattered. And in families who've gone through these tragedies, where the lost loved one was a donor, whether it be the brother, the wife, the child, the parent, this helps that process immensely. It doesn't diminish the love or the loss, but it's a way that these families can celebrate that life. I worked on New Year's, the Pasadena Rose Bowl parade. I sang at their gala, and I met these families. The float was floragraphs, or floral pictures of the donors who passed away. And on the float were their families. And the joy of life that these families get is an amazing thing to be able to behold. And it's the reason I'm here to express gratitude to you. I'm going to sing one more song, and it's a song about gratitude.